In this video, we're going to go ahead and create our form and pre-populate our form with data. So we'll actually start with this add student form.jsp, and I'll basically copy this form and rename it for the update form. So I just do a right click, I choose copy, and then I'll just go through and paste. So the name of this form here, I'll call it the update student form.jsp. And once we're happy with that name, we go ahead and click on OK. All right, so let's go ahead and open up our update student form.jsp. I'll just walk through this form and just do some cosmetic changes. So I'll just say update student as far as the title. And then for the header, here I'll say update student. So just basic cosmetic changes there. Now moving down to line 23, we're going to change the command. So instead of the add command, we're going to display this new command, or we're going to enter this new command here called update. So we'll send over an update command to our student controller servlet. So let's go ahead and set the value here for this text field. So this is the value that's actually displayed when the user actually sees the form for the first time. And for the actual value, what we'll do is we'll actually make use of that student object that was set by the servlet, and we'll say the student.firstname. So basically here, by saying value equals, this will actually pre-populate the field with the student's first name. Now you're looking at this and you're probably wondering, well, why is it the_student? Well, let's go back and look at our servlet. So in our student controller servlet, for the load feature or the load method, and I'll scroll down a bit. So when we would actually load a student, down on lines 86 and 87, that's where we actually set the student in the request attribute. So we'd say request.setAttribute, we give the_student. That's the attribute name. And that's the actual attribute name that you use in the JSP page. So the_student is the actual attribute name, and we'll use that in our actual form. All right, so that kind of clears up the attribute item. So here, I'll use the_student. So that's the attribute name set by the servlet. And I'll say the_student.firstname. And it'll call the appropriate getter method to get the first name. Now I'll just copy this entry here for each one of the other fields. I'll do the same thing here for last name. And I'll just do a copy paste. And I will change this field here to say last name. So again, this will pre-populate the field with the student's last name. And I'll do a similar thing here for the email address. So I'll say thestudent.email. All right, so this looks pretty good. So basically this section of code here is what we use to pre-populate the form with the information from the student, their first name, last name, and email address. Oh, and actually there's one other thing that I forgot to do here. I need to add a new hidden field. So let me copy line 23 and let me move down and paste a copy of that. And I need to set up the actual student ID. So I need to say the name is student ID, and then the value is the student.id. What we need to do is we actually need to track that student ID. So when we actually do an update and we send it over to the servlet knows which student ID we need to perform an update for. So the ID here is actually very important. So I'm glad I remembered to add that. Alrighty, so we can save this, and we can actually go through and test this form right now just to make sure that it can actually load the student and pre-populate it. So let me go ahead and run my application here. They show the page along with the update links. So let me kind of focus in on one of these students and just test this out. So for this first student here, Maxwell Dixon, let's go ahead and click the update link. It should show the form with his information pre-populated. Cool, this looks really, really good. So look, here's Maxwell Dixon. So what happened with that update link is that we actually retrieved the student from the database, and then we would actually use that information to pre-populate the form. So this is great. Let's try it one more time with another student. So let's go back to our list, and I'll zoom in here on Mary Public. And I'll click on update, and okay, again, works out just fine. So great. So this all works out just fine. So the whole idea of pre-populating a form, we've accomplished this by making use of that command equals load, and then we pass in the appropriate student ID. So our servlet and dbutil does work on the back end, and then it sends it over to the JSP to pre-populate the form. So this is really good. I'm happy. I'm excited because we're making some really good progress. So good job so far.